Okay, good morning, everyone. This should eventually make it to YouTube. Trying something new today. I am recording and live streaming through Google Meet at the same time. I think my computer can handle it. I'm getting my iPad set up. No, I'm not. My battery's dead. All right, so I'll have to use my mouse to draw today. Plug this in so it's available this afternoon. All right, so we're going to get into photosynthesis today. You've probably talked about it before in other classes. So photosynthesis is, I'm sure you already know this, conversion of light into chemical energy. So we call plants autotrophs, and if you want to get really specific, it's photoautotrophs. There's chemotrophs too, which instead of like eating other plants or animals, they will eat geological chemicals in the environment. So should just be a very quick review. If I was going to ask you the difference between these, you should be able to tell me those pretty easily. Your autotrophs over on this side, those are things that make their own food from simpler things in the environment. And over on this side, your little bunny there, heterotrophs cannot make their own food, so they have to live off of other organisms. There's a few that do both, but this isn't really a good time to stop and talk about all those. Where do we think photosynthesis came from? Okay, photosynthesis, we think, came from prokaryotes. And there are bacteria called cyanobacteria, and cyan is a word for a color. It's kind of like a bluish green, and they are the earliest prokaryote that we know can do this. There's fossil evidence of these that go back something like 3.89 billion years. I think they found that in Australia. And the early Earth's atmosphere really didn't have as much oxygen as it does now. It was really, really low in oxygen. So for billions of years, these guys and plants oxygenated the Earth's atmosphere. So very, very long, slow process, but we got oxygen up to about 20% of the atmosphere. It's thought that animal life wouldn't be able to exist in the ways it does now without all that oxygen, because you need oxygen to fuel rapid chemical reaction, or not to fuel, but to enable rapid chemical reactions required for animal life. So if there wasn't that much oxygen, animal life might be really, really slow or something like that. So I'm just going to do a stop and check. Can everybody see the screen and my picture okay? I can't see anything about you guys, so you got to give me a off the mic yes or no. I can't see. Okay, there you go. All right, so sorry I can't see your chat. I might need to get a second chat computer. It's kind of crazy, but that's what it takes now. All right. So we think that these prokaryotic photosynthetic reactions were the foundation of eukaryotic photosynthesis. So this is plants, okay? So we think the prokaryotes evolved the same or sort of the basic reactions that happen in plants today. So in plants, when we think of plants, we usually think of something with stalks, stems, or trunks, and then leaves. So leaves are where this is happening at. Leaves are the main site of photosynthesis, okay? In most plants. There's things like, you got cactus that have just kind of like their surface. But in most plants, leaves is where it's at. And inside of leaves, we have an organelle called chloroplast, which we learned about last unit. So now we're going to just The order of things taught are in this class is kind of important because it builds, upon each layer. Leaves have a layer called the mesophyll, which meso just means middle. So the chloroplasts are not on the surface of the leaf. The surface of the leaf is actually almost like your skin, okay? And on that skin, there are these little organs that kind of look like two curved bratwursts side by side called stomata. And those can sort of open and close by swelling up with water. And these are an adaptation that stops the plant from losing water. So these will open and close as the plant needs to do different functions, and that's related to day and night. So these are basically the plant's respiratory openings, okay, breathing holes in the plant. And now each leaf is going to have a lot of these, and we'll look at their function a little bit later in more detail. All right, so if you took an individual chloroplast and broke it down, what would you find? Okay, in general, you're going to find a double membrane. Okay, and this double membrane, you can I'm just kind of circling it right here. We have an outer membrane, the inner membrane, and then an inner membrane space, and that'll kind of be important as we break this down. So just kind of know the anatomy of the chloroplast, because the structure of the chloroplast is really, key to understanding its function. So like I just said there, we have this double membrane. I'm going to find a place to put my picture that I just pointed out to you. We also have this stuff just kind of floating in. It's kind of like a cytoplasm for chloroplast. It's called the stroma. Okay, the stroma right here is this area. On this picture, it's kind of yellowish, that all these interparts of the chloroplast exist, and it's aqueous, okay? Why aqueous? There's lots of things moving around in here, lots of reactions. Reactions happen rather nicely inside of a liquid environment. The next part we have are thylakoids, okay? A thylakoid is one of these little pill-shaped, they actually look like stacks of cookies or Oreos or pancakes, and a whole stack of these is called a granum. So a stack, granum, an individual one, is a thylakoid. And inside of the thylakoid, there's a space called the lumen where, again, more chemical reactions take place. So it's important to kind of pause here and understand that there's a lot of reactions happening here. They happen in different compartments, just like I keep talking about that kitchen thing where you mix up something in the kitchen. You don't mix your lasagna, your salad, and your cake mix all in the same bowl. You do things in different bowls or compartments. All these are compartments here, okay? So that we have to really kind of pay attention to where these things are happening. Now, I can't see you guys, so any questions at this point?
No.
Good. Thank you for the no's. It kind of lets me know that, because right now I don't see anything, and that's kind of scary. So thank you for the no's.
Mr. Sater, are the recording is going to be posted? Because I'm not catching up on writing. I'm paying attention to what you're saying and then doing it, writing it later.
Yes, I will put the this will go on YouTube, and I can probably even give you something to structure your writing. So if you're trying to furiously keep up, you might want to just wait and review this a little bit later.
Yeah, I stopped to listen and not write because I can't write and listen at the same time.
Yeah, that's fine. So let me go ahead and head to the next slide here. Now, I'm going to show you a reaction you've probably seen before, but this is a very simplified version of it. So this very simplified formula that I just popped up right here, this is something that you've probably seen before, but we're going to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. And we didn't know this for a long time. When scientists first started doing this stuff, where do you think they thought the oxygen produced by plants came from? So let's look at this is where I need you guys to come off mute and help me out. We have CO2 going in and we have water going in. They both have oxygen in them. Where do you think scientists thought the oxygen that plants exhale came from? Do you think they think it came from the CO2 or the water?
CO2.
Anybody else agree with her, disagree with her? All right, you are right. It did come from, that's what they thought it came from. That just kind of made sense. It's kind of like, well, you got 6 times 2 is 12. You got 12 oxygens in the CO2. You got 12 oxygens in the O2. So it must be photosynthesis is stripping that carbon off of the CO2 and putting it into glucose. And then it just kind of gets rid of the oxygen. Well, it took a long time to figure this out, but that's not how it works. The oxygen actually comes from the water. And how did we figure that out? We used radioactive CO2 and radioactive water, where we used, I should say, heavy CO2 and heavy water. We used isotopes of oxygen that were in carbon dioxide to see if the oxygen that was the heavier isotope, so that isotope had more neutrons in it, and we wanted to see which way the reaction worked. Here's how it actually works. The carbon, there's only one place for it to go. It goes to the glucose. So all the sugars and all the carbs you've ever consumed were once part of the atmosphere. So that's kind of cool. So all the carbs in your proteins in your body were once in the air. The oxygens in the carbon dioxide some of them end up in the glucose, and some of them end up in the water. All right, so what happens to the hydrogen and oxygen in the water? Some of this hydrogen ends up in the sugar, and it has to, okay? These are the only places that hydrogen ends up. So this is pretty easy, this side of it. Like, where does the hydrogen go is not a hard part of this reaction. Where the oxygen goes, the oxygen that you are breathing right now that was made by plants is actually water. So when we break photosynthesis down, it's splitting water in two. It also does that for CO2, but it really cracks the water in two. And these hydrogens are going to be really important to how we track what's going on in photosynthesis. So when you think of photosynthesis, think of splitting water. Now there's more than that, but that's what you need to understand. Like, if I ask you, well, these oxygens over here that come out of plants, where did they come from? They come from water.
Mr. Sater, so basically, like, we create, sugar by like breaking down water and carbon dioxide.
Yeah, I would maybe add a little to that. I would say breaking down and rearranging. Okay. Good. Yeah, I'm glad you're saying something. It lets me know that you guys are out there. I invite everybody to maybe participate in class a little bit more. All right. So, little chemistry review, okay? Photosynthesis splits water, we just kind of said that on the last slide, into hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, let's talk about what are called redox reactions. Redox reactions involve the transfer of electrons. So when we reduce something, we're talking about electron transfer. Okay, so not this time we're not just worried only about, well, where are the individual atoms going? We're also worried about where electrons are going. Okay. So in photosynthesis, the electrons are transferred with the hydrogen ions that are split off from water. So if I can maybe draw a line here, the water hydrogen ions are split off, and they are going to reduce carbon dioxide into sugar. So we'll talk more about that. If your chemistry is kind of like, I'm not sure I remember all this, let's review it a little bit here. All right, so there's two sort of memory tools that chemistry students have used for a long time, and they go like this, okay? Oxidation is losing electrons and reduction is gaining electrons. So how do you remember that, okay? And there are these little phrases right here. Oil rig is the one I like, but other people like this one over here. Oil rig, oxidation is lost, reduction is gained. Well, what are they talking about? They're talking about electrons. So oxidation is a loss of electrons. Reduction is a gain of electrons. This other one, Leo, I guess Leo the lion, goes grr. So we have this lion making his grr noise. And you could say loss of electrons, oxidation, gain electrons, reduction. So either one of those will get you to the same place. You just need to know that oxidation is a loss of electron, reduction is a gain of electrons. So when we talk about this, we are going to reduce, okay? And when we say reduce, you kind of think like, well, if I reduce the amount of money in my wallet, it's getting smaller. Don't get lost in that, okay? By CO2 getting reduced, it's actually gaining electrons. So when we transfer electrons to CO2, that's a gain. So the reduction of CO2 is what makes sugar in photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is reducing sugars. If you're going to reduce sugars, you have to balance this out with oxidation. You're going to oxidize water. Where did we say the electrons came from for this reduction? We said they came from water. So we have the oxidation. So when water is oxidized, it loses the electrons and it becomes plain old atmospheric oxygen. How does it lose the electrons? The hydrogen is going to carry the electrons to the CO2 and make the sugar. So this is a lot to take in. I'm trying to intentionally slow down a little bit here to make this even more detailed. We break certain types of photosynthesis into two stages. Let's take a look at those. We have the light reactions, and we have what are called the Calvin cycle. Some people like to take the word photosynthesis. Photo means light, like photons, and synthesis means make. So things are happening on both sides, but the final production is in the synthesis side. So there are two stages that you're going to have to break down. All right, pacing okay? Everybody with me still?
Yeah.
All right, good. So it's probably important that we stop and do a physics review at this point, okay? And so we're going to look at light real briefly here. Light is electromagnetic energy, okay? Well, what's electromagnetic energy? Those are, it's a wave that's made up of photons, and photons are terribly small little particles, way smaller than like, protons and electrons that travel in waves, okay? And if you remember anything about waves, waves have a wavelength, okay? Whoop, my mouse got away from me there. But a wavelength is the distance from one crest to one crest, or one trough, probably fix that a little bit, to one trough. So this is a wavelength right here. This is a wavelength right here. And the waves of light are really small. They're measured in nanometers. So we are mainly concerned about one little section of this whole electromagnetic spectrum. So if you're a physicist, there's really no difference between light, microwaves, radio waves, X-rays. It's really just their frequency and wavelength, okay? And when a wave travels at the same speed, which is what light does, the speed of light is the same for pretty much all of these. If you crank up the wavelength, okay, the wavelength gets longer, the frequency goes down. If the wavelength gets shorter, the frequency goes up. All right. So I want you to think about a wave of light. And then maybe this wave. So one of these has a really long wavelength. That would be this one over here. The wavelength is much longer than, say, this one over here. Which one is going to have more energy? The short wavelength or the long wavelength? Let's unmute.
The short.
That's right, the short. And a lot of students have trouble like understanding that, because they're like, well, longer is bigger. More, longer is more energy. If you thought of a tennis ball on the top of each crest of the wave, and this wave was hitting you in the head, the amount of time between tennis balls on this long wave would be bigger. This would be like a machine gun hitting you with tennis balls. It'd be like bop, 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 high frequency. This one would be slower. It'd be bop, bop, bop. So more energy is going to hit you or be absorbed or whatever with short wavelengths than long wavelengths. Okay, so the entire part that we're concerned with is about 380 to 750 nanometers, and that's just this one little slice right here. Okay, let's go on and look at this a little bit more. So I already reviewed this with you. Short wavelengths are higher energy. Long wavelengths are lower energy. We talked about why. The long wavelength is less hits per second. The short wavelength is more hits per second.
Is the energy the same as vibration, like higher vibration, or is that different?
So your light isn't really you're probably thinking of sound.
Yeah, probably.
So in sound, a higher vibration is going to have more energy, and high-pitched noises are usually more damaging to your ears. So, I mean, bass sounds can still be really loud. They just don't hit you as often. So, let's stick with light. good question, but let's stick with light because it is the same thing. Like a high energy sound does have more a high frequency sound does have more energy. So, but light can do the same things that sound can do when it waves all do this, whether they're sound or light waves, okay? So when light hits something, it can be reflected. If you've ever been in a room with really dark paint, you don't see, the light seems to really dim down a lot because there's not as much reflection. It can, excuse me. Light can be transmitted. Well, what's that mean? Well, that's like glass or air. Light can go through some things. And it can do it really easily depending on what it is. Like light doesn't go through water very far, but it goes through air fairly well. And the last one, the one you're probably the most familiar with, is light being absorbed. And this is the one we're kind of really going to, reflection and absorption are what we're really worried about right now. So plants have substances called pigments that can absorb visible light. Now this can be a little counterintuitive, but the color that hits your eyes is the light that's reflected. So if let me draw real quick here. If this is the sun, and the sun has the full spectrum in it, the light from the sun has all the colors we see in it. If this is you standing there with like a green shirt on, okay? Well, let's make it red since I'm drawing in red. All the colors come out and everything is absorbed except for red. So red gets reflected back out and then it's going to hit your eyeball. It's supposed to be your eyeball right there, your eyelashes. So you see red because everything but red is absorbed. I think I can change colors here. So let's say you had on a green shirt or green whatever. I'm not going to draw a shirt this time. Every color hits this, but all of them are absorbed except for green, which is reflected back to your eyes. So when you look at a plant and a plant is green, do plants use green light? What would you guess?
Can you say the question again?
So plants are green in general, like leaves, grass, they're all green. What colors of light do you think plants mainly are going to find useful? Is it going to be in the greens, the reds, everything but green?
Everything but green?
Yeah, everything but green is what you're looking for. I mean, they use a little bit of it, but they absorb all the light except for the green light. So plants reflect green, so they're mainly going to be users of things outside of the green spectrum. Okay. So this graph right here shows what's called the absorption coefficient. Okay? That's basically how much light is absorbed by these two substances up here. The green line is going to be chlorophyll A. Okay? And if you look at chlorophyll A, it's going, just look only at the green line. I should have made this word green, but only looking at the green line, it goes up really high in this sort of purple blue area, and then it goes up really high in this reddish orange yellow area, and it is the lowest in sort of the greenish area. So this shows us that chlorophyll A, and it's not like A or B on a test, there really is a substance called chlorophyll A. It's the primary pigment, and it is involved in the light reactions, and it is a blue-green pigment, so it's going to absorb everything but green and blue really, really well. Chlorophyll B is a accessory pigment, and it is mainly concerned with yellows and greens. If you look at the B line, you can kind of see that it has a little bit different profile that kind of has shifted over to the side a little bit. So this yellow and green pigment making up chlorophyll B, what you see is when they work together, they're lowest in the green area. So these two chlorophyll types absorb pretty much everything but green, and that's why plants appear green to us. Now, if you're looking out the windows the last month, you know that most of our trees aren't green anymore. Plants have other pigments in them, and one of them is known as carotenoids, and you can kind of see the word carrot in here, and carrots are orange. These pigments are a really broad spectrum of colors, and these also help drive photosynthesis, and different plants have these in different concentrations, and that's why certain plants in the fall look different colors. You know, some are really bright yellow, bright red, some are really dull brown. They all kind of end up brown in the end, but these are left over in the fall after the plant sort of allows it stops photosynthesis. It's expensive to make these pigments, and the green ones are the first ones to be withdrawn from the leaf.
So I have a question. So by that you mean like there's no more peaks? It's just like mostly a straight line for all of them, or what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by broadening the spectrum of colors?
Okay, so we looked at chlorophyll A and B. They had two areas on the spectrum that were high, right? Let's go back. If we wanted to get more out of all these different wavelengths of light, we would have to have pigments that broaden the availability. So you have to have more colors. There are colors in plants, but they're not at the same concentrations. Let's talk a little bit more about how they work, and I think that might answer your question. What do these do? Okay, these help photosynthesis by offering what's called photoprotection. They're basically sunscreens for plants, okay? So photosynthesis only uses certain areas of the spectrum. The areas that aren't used could create problems for the plant, and they do by interacting with the oxygen that's inside the leaf. When this oxygen gets hit by light that's outside of the photosynthetic spectrum, so orange, so greens, so green light, it can create interactions that make these substances called free radicals, and those are really bad for all sorts of life. There's a group of like health supplements you can buy called antioxidants that break down free radicals. So these other pigments provide protection for the plant. So carotenoids are sort of like a sunscreen for the plant. That's what we see in the fall. That's what we see in certain vegetables, okay? Like peppers, orange and yellow vegetables, and red. So these are, in leaves, they're used to protect the plant from harmful rays of light. Now, in flowers and in fruits, they're colorful so they can attract things to eat them and spread the seeds. So let's do a quick check of just how we're doing real quick here. So this question is, and I showed you the answer faster than I wanted to, a photon of which color of light has more energy? Would it be yellow or purple? Well, the shorter wavelength has more energy. So the purple, as you move toward the violet end of the rainbow, you get more energy. So ultraviolet light, which is what sunscreen protects us from, has more energy than infrared light, which is mainly heat for us. All right, the next one, also another really easy question here. Tell me the difference between heterotrophs and autotrophs. You guys, I know you can do this, okay? Autotrophs make their own food. Heterotrophs eat other things. So I'm not worried about you not knowing that one for sure. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and we'll post this for you.